Welcome and thank you for standing by. At this time, all participants are in listen-only mode. After the presentation, we will conduct a question-and-answer session. Today's conference is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. And now I would like to introduce your host for today's conference, Liz Matthews. You may begin.
Thank you, Jeff. Hello and welcome, everybody. This is Planning Your Post-Service Career. So I wanted to get started by just giving you some tips for participating first. You may notice we are now using Adobe Connect, which has a different layout and several added features from the WebEx that we had been using. The main difference you may have discovered is that you can now listen through your computer, so hopefully that works well for many of you. We wanted to remind you that you can ask questions several different ways. You can submit them at any time by using the Q&A feature, which is underneath the chat, which it looks like you all have definitely already discovered, which is great. So we are going to address the questions at the end of the presentation, starting at 3 o'clock. We'll have 30 minutes for questions after the formal Q&A. You can also know that right now all of the microphone lines and phone lines are muted to help keep the background noise to a minimum. But later on, we'll open those lines and you'll get instructions again from the operator so that you know how to make your questions known. I also want to point out that there is a little hand that you see above the PowerPoint presentation, and if you click on that down arrow, you'll see that you have an option to raise your hand there, and that's how we'll know that you're asking a question through VoIP. And so once you've raised your hand, one of our hosts will be in touch to help you set up your microphone. So you can share your tips and resources and ideas and where you're from, as you've been doing, by using the chat feature. You can send a chat message privately to the host and presenters, but keep in mind that your message to attendees will be visible to everybody. So just keep that in mind as you compose your messages. We'll also display the phone number and passcode in the bottom right corner of each screen. So if you get disconnected, you'll be able to call back in if you're using the traditional phone. And if you have technical issues, you can let us know through the Q&A feature. And if you get disconnected from Adobe Connect altogether, you can rejoin using the link that was emailed to you. So as the operator mentioned, this webinar is being recorded, and it will be available on the Webinars for Vista's page of the campus, along with the other sessions that we've presented. The slides for this presentation will also be sent in a follow-up email along with additional resources on today's topic. And you may also notice one of the new features under the tips for participating that you see there in the PowerPoint. Underneath that, there's a box with files, and you can actually download this presentation right now if you would like to. Okay, with that, welcome again to this webinar for AmeriCorps Vistas on planning your post-service career. So no matter where you are during your service term, whether you've just started or you're about to exit service, it's great that you all are giving strategic thought to what it is that you're going to do after your service year. So congratulations for taking that step. I'm your host, Liz Matthews. I'm an outreach specialist here with AmeriCorps Vista in the headquarters in Washington, D.C., and I'm joined with your team that's behind the scenes with Robin and Rebecca, who are here from Campaign Consultation. So they are there to help make sure all your questions get answered and everything goes smoothly in terms of the technology. So we are lucky to have Denise Riedman facilitating today's webinar. Denise is the Director of Career Development and Alumni Services at the Trachtenberg School of Public Policy and Public Administration at George Washington University. She did serve as a Vista from 1994 to 95 and has had a very interesting career path that led her to her current position. So you'll hear more about that later in the presentation. So Denise is very passionate about national service and has great information to share with you today. So with that, I will turn it on over to Denise.
Thanks, Liz. I'm very excited, and when I was thinking about what I actually think is my best qualification is because I've had getting from here to there where there keeps changing all throughout my career. I absolutely, if anyone takes a chance after this to look at my LinkedIn profile or hear my story, it's been a crazy career path, and I wouldn't trade it for any minute. I also, when I was in graduate school, and I thought I had it all figured out, U.S. News and World Report had come to our school and wanted to interview the most angst-ridden grad student, and I was nominated by our provost and my advisor. So I get it. I've lived and breathed all this, and would say I still continue to hope that my there keeps changing, because that's what makes life interesting. So we're going to start right in with all of this. Okay, so how many of you might be struggling with too many ideas? And always feel free when I ask some of these questions, use the chat feature if some of you are like, I have so many things going on in my head that I don't know which way to go. So some people are in that situation. Some people might be in that situation. Anyone sitting there thinking, I love seeing in the chat right now, lots of people have the too many. How about the too few? People are like, I don't really know what I want to do, and there's not really anything that's jumping out at me. So there's people like that. And then how about some people who, I know where I want to go, but I have no idea what the pathway could look like to get there. So these are often the challenges that I work with when I'm working with students and I'm working with AmeriCorps members, AmeriCorps alum. And I hope you can all see from all what's going on in the chat, you're not alone. And half the time that is just the battle to know that you're not the only one that feels this way. So hopefully by the end of today, you'll have a little bit more clarity about how to figure this out. So here are some of the things we're going to talk today. First, about self-exploration, kind of the pathways of career planning, how to do what I call deconstructing a career path, which I think gives you a lot of insights, generalist versus specialist, and graduate school. I actually saw in one of the chats that came through, sometimes when you know what you don't want to do, that is huge clues. And part of when you're early in your career is kind of crossing things off the path. So this is all good stuff we're going to talk about today. So first, let's get into self-exploration. I like to think about the magic combination is when causes, culture, and competency come together to that sweet spot right in the middle. How do you figure that sweet spot out? How do you begin to address some of this? First, we're going to look at causes. I am sure so many of you on this phone have so many causes you care about and so many things that you look at what's going on in the world and you're constantly like, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to do this. So I'm going to walk you through. This is an activity that I created that I'm going to walk you through. And again, I want you to remember that all this information is going to be available online, so you can walk yourself through this later, because we won't have time to go step by step through this, but just to give you an idea to help think about it. So I encourage people to write down all the causes you care about in the world, and do this as a random conscious. Don't censor yourself, say, oh, I should think of this and I shouldn't think of that. Just write down everything that you care about. And then I encourage you to put it into 4 different buckets: where you want to learn, donate money, volunteer, and then finally where you want to work. But being aware that this will shift throughout your lifetime. After I finished national service, I actually went to the woods of Montana and taught where there was no electricity and no telephone, and taught environmental education for several years until down the road, I realized I wanted to go back into youth development. So now, for me, environmental field is something I learn and I donate money to, but I don't necessarily work in. So you want to think about these. How do you help yourself get some clarity around this? Here are some questions to begin to think about. Where did you get really drawn to? When you pick up the newspaper, what section do you want to read? What newsletters do you look at? When someone sends you a link on the emails, and which things do you want to read about? And I think the last question is huge, and this really gets at kind of what your values are. Is that when you look back on your life, what, because you have lived, do you want to say you've changed? So again, just taking the time to think about this with causes and to, again, put them into the buckets and think about, okay, this is what I want to work on now. It doesn't mean that door is going to be shut to you. That often comes up. People are like, oh, my gosh, well, what if they want to do this later? You have a long career ahead of you. And, I even think I've been working now for 20 years. I have another 30 years of work. Who knows what's going to come into my life that's going to get me excited? So again, thinking about the possibilities. So the first one we're going to do is thinking about causes. And next I want you to think about is culture. Organizational culture, where you are working, is one of the areas that I have found people underestimate how important it is. I had, again, you're going to hear a little bit about my own crazy career. When I was 30, I had quit my job and went to Asia to teach English and came back and took a job at a nonprofit where the job description, I was a youth development coordinator running an AmeriCorps program. On paper, it was fantastic. I had been living at home with my parents in Delaware at 31 years old, so I was desperate to get out of the house and had not asked the right questions about the organization, and the organizational culture was so unhealthy. So again, the difference between job description and culture. So how do you begin to think about this? I like to think about it in a couple different ways. Is one, what is the size of the boat that you're on, whether or not you want a small nonprofit, large, medium size. So thinking about what are the resources, all of those kind of tools that will go about. If you're in a large ship, you have a lot of resources, might be harder to navigate, more people, so it could be challenging. Smaller one, easier to navigate, you have more flexibility, less resources. Next, who's running your ship? Now, we'd all like to have Captain Jack Sparrow. Maybe we wouldn't want him running our ship. What's the leadership look like? What's the board look like? What is the direction of the organization? And then also, who's on your ship with you? What are the colleagues like? I really love the organization I'm at now when I'm at a university. I love the kind of people that are drawn to that. So really getting a sense of this. How do you figure some of this out? These are some categories that I encourage you to look at. Just kind of you can really dig down deeper into each of these and what do you look for around the financial stability of an organization, the physical environment. Do you want your own office? Do you want a cubicle? Do you like open workspaces? What are the dynamics? Do you have to come in early? Do you have to work late? Weekends? What's leadership? These are all these things that make a huge difference in your happiness. And then with this, you can't have everything, so thinking about your must-haves and your like-to-haves. Okay, so next we're going to talk about is competencies, and this is what you bring to the table. And again, here's a larger category, and I'm going to show you some resources at the end where you can go to that'll dig a little bit deeper into kind of some of these categories. This is, again, just a tool to get you started and to think under each of these should be a lot of different categories. For example, under communications could be social media, written, oral, all of those things. This is just to get you started thinking about it. And again, going back into these buckets. And typically I think about 3 buckets here, what you don't like and or don't do well, what you'd be really happy never doing again. The larger middle bucket is typically things that you like and do well, and the smaller one are things that you love and or do great. Sometimes there's things on these lists that you don't do great yet with, but you want to figure out how to cultivate. So again, kind of putting all of these into buckets without censoring yourself. And then you're going to put these all together, and here's the reality what's going to happen. You might have this job that kind of goes really big in the causes, but not so much. And then you get one that's more in the culture and the competencies. And then you might get one which is completely wrong. It wasn't the right fit. And then another one, and then you might get closer, and then you're hopefully going to be working towards the sweet spot. So it's a process because you're not going to necessarily know all the things that you're great at, that you're not great at. You're not going to know your competencies yet. It's continually evolving, but you want to keep working for that sweet spot. So here are some additional resources. You can certainly go back through this PowerPoint and work piece by piece through that section I talked about, but here are some other great sites that you can look at. And I'm going to just pass it back to Liz, who's going to show you a little bit about what's available on Vista Campus, which is a tremendous resource for you. Liz?
Sorry, I have my mute button on.
Oh, there we go.
Thank you. Okay, so just a couple of resources on the campus to remind you of that are there for you at any time to access. There's a whole Life After Vista section. So there's a course here that you can take to reflect on your service year and plan your next steps. There's a Vista Works course that also helps you look through career exploration and really piggybacks a lot on what Denise has been going through so far. So this is a really great section that you guys can take a look at, and we'll also be revising it over the next few months, so keep your eyes posted, and there'll be some good information there. And also keep in mind that they're in the forums on the campus. There's a job board forum, and we often post positions both federally and Vista leader positions are posted up there, positions here at the Corporation for National and Community Service. So that's a great resource to keep your eye on as well. So
great.
Back to you.
Thanks, Liz. And, there's obviously, if you go to the career section in any bookstore, people still go to bookstores every now and then, or you go to Amazon, there's so many books on all this, and I highly recommend them, but I'm also aware that it's a lot to do in those books, so hopefully some of these sites and the guide that I created kind of simplify the process, because I'm just, not everybody has all the time to go through that whole thinking process with it of what's in a book, so this will at least give you a taste to get started. So once you've done the self-exploration, now what? How do you actually begin to take some action? And maybe being a little banana farmer. I like my little monkey there. Okay, so let's talk about next. Okay, so first we're going to talk kind of like snapshot. Like here's some immediate things you can begin to start to do. Short-term career planning. Highly encourage you, before anything, take a step back and start reading and learning. One of the easiest tools that I find that gives you a lot of aha moments is to look for career. Just get from a number of job boards. It could be as simple as Idealist, higher education jobs, net impact if you're interested in corporate social responsibility. Just start getting job postings, and just anything that piques your interest, just save. I just always encourage you, you might even just email them to yourself and put it into an account. And then after a couple weeks, so just quickly scan them, a couple weeks, just print out a bunch of them and put them all out and take a highlighter and start to notice what's going on. Are you continually drawn to the same types of jobs? What are the roles? What are the responsibilities? What might be something you're like, oh my God, I would love to do this in 15, 20 years. What is it that I need? You're going to be amazed when you start to pay attention to what you're just instinctively drawn in the job postings. You're going to start to see competencies, education, types of organizations that are drawing you. So easy first step. Next is another one, LinkedIn. I'm a huge fan of LinkedIn. Not even worrying about your own profile. Just spend some time looking at other people's. Use the search feature. Start looking, if you think you might want to do, community development, if you think you want to be a director of development, look at people's profiles. Look at their pathways. See what's of interest. Read what they're actually doing in their job. Again, an easy way to start to see what are some options that are available to you. And the next thing under learning is look at employers and industries. There's so many e-newsletters you can get, LinkedIn groups, websites. So start getting them, and then when you're getting them, be aware of which ones you ignore and delete. I have tons of groups in my LinkedIn, and I became very aware recently there were some that every time I got a notice, I never even bothered to read it. Delete it. And then I was like, wow, maybe I thought I was interested in this field and I'm not. So kind of do those kind of gut checks. So first we want to start reading and learning. Pretty simple stuff. Next, what you want to do is start talking and listening to people. I'm sure many of you have heard the power of what's called informational interviewing, networking meetings. These are short meetings that you have with people, 15 to 20 minutes. Maybe a half an hour. You're talking with people in different fields. I prefer to have them in person. It's an ideal if you can get them at someone's organization, because then you're going to, again, get an idea about culture of an organization. When you go to visit somebody there, are people talking? Are people in their offices? You get an idea of kind of what things to really be like. Again, you're getting a little bit more about my own career. After my first master's, I can consider getting another master's in education, and I had gotten into a program to become a secondary school teacher, and then spent some time talking to secondary school teachers and shadowed them for a day and realized what the culture was really like. And it was that moment that I had the epiphany that I loved teaching and training. For me, being a teacher in a school system was not the right fit. It was a huge aha moment that I probably would not have gotten. I possibly would even have gone back to school for that master's, that second master's, if I hadn't taken the time to shadow somebody, really ask them, what does day-to-day look like? What do you love about your job? What do you not love about your job? Really simple things you can do that get you those ahas. And then the listening. start going to events. No matter where you are, community development events, speakers, universities, see which ones you're ready to go to. See which ones that you're like, I kind of am dragging myself to, and the ones that you're like canceling plans to meet your friends at happy hour because you're dying to go to them. And at the same time, again, the usual trick is be aware when you're at them, maybe when you're playing with your phone. Remember that scene when John McCain recently got caught during the Libya hearings playing poker on his phone? That was everybody. Jon Stewart on The Daily Show had a heyday with it. But those events that you're at where you don't even take your phone out of your bag. You're so attentive to what's going on. And those that you think you should be paying attention to and you realize you're texting your friends. Clues that start to pop up. So these are some nice short-term, immediate things that you can be thinking about. Now we've got the short-term. Let's start thinking long-term. So when we think long-term career planning, we want to kind of go big picture. And this is where I talk about career. And yes, I know it is misspelled with 3 E's, and there is a purpose you will now see. I like to think about the 3 legs to the stool that will help you with long-term planning. First one is going to be thinking about your education. And this is everything from undergraduate, additional training, certifications. If you're in, when you start to go to school, what kind of academics that you can, additional papers that you can do and thesis that you can write on to really be able to build an education that supports where you want to go. So the first leg is education. We're going to talk a little bit further about education later on, whether or not you actually need it or not. You might just need an additional certification in, say, nonprofit management, and you don't actually need to go back for another degree. But it's thinking about and studying what education. This goes back to thinking about talking to people and LinkedIn profiles. See what education people have. They may or may not have education where you think you would need to get it for that field. So education is our first E. Our second E is employment, and that is in your current position and future positions. Sheryl Sandberg wrote the book Lean In. I like to use the phrase lean out. You want to look at how you can make your job go up and out, expand your responsibilities. Again, when I was at a nonprofit, I knew I wanted to get into training work, so I wrote a grant to be able to develop a civic leadership institute so I could write and train people, write curriculum and develop a training. That was not in my original responsibilities. I talked to my boss about it. It worked into the goals of the organization, and I developed new skill sets around this. So you want to look at what you can do in your current position, whether your current Vista position, if you're an alum in your position now, that to expand your responsibilities to think about and try new areas that may or may not work for you, but what a great place to try it within your current organization. And finally, the last E is what I call enrichment. And this is all the different ways you can build up. Say you already have your education and you're done with that and you're in your current job and there's not much more you can do. This is where you can really build out. Pro bono work, professional volunteering is a great way to build experience, to try again things out, joining associations, going to trainings, conferences, how you brand yourself. This is everything around the other side. This is really what, if people have been part of my other workshops, I use the term social capital. This is building who you are, what you can do in the world. This is something, even when your education is set and your employment is set, you always want to be mindful and thinking of doing. I just finished a training yesterday that someone gave me for free. Was it exactly what I wanted to do? No. Is it great for building my experience? Absolutely. So as a free training, I took advantage of it. So constantly be thinking about education, employment, enrichment, those 3 legs of the table, and how you can build this up. Lots of resources on different associations and conferences that you can be a part of. Very easy to find them in your community and find them nationally. There's a National Association of Associations. You can look for all of this. Another great way to find out about this, conferences and associations, looking at someone's LinkedIn profile, see what things they're a part of. I'm all about making it as easy as possible for you to know what's going on without having to do all the work. There's a lot of pro bono organizations like Compass Point here in D.C. There's Start a Fire that's based in New York City. Idealist lists these opportunities. So we've got some of this for the long-term planning, thinking about your career path. Everybody always thinks, this is going to be my path. It's going to start here and it's going to go here. Here's the reality of what success looks like. And I think once people can make peace with that fact that success is going to look like this, and that's what makes it interesting. I think it's when we resist the fact that success actually looks like that we struggle. It's in all those squiggles that we add the color to our life. So it's really looking very much at what is this whole path and just having fun with it. So let's talk a little bit more about having fun with it and kind of deconstructing the career path. People play Chinese checkers, to get from one side to the other, it is impossible to go on a straight line. It's always going to be in all different ways. So one example we're going to start with, because a lot of people involved in national service want to maybe someday be an executive director. So, for example, to become an executive director, there are several different career paths that people will typically take. One could be around the program and services, operations side, going up to be a COO of something, partnerships and strategy, director of development, and communications. So these are, say, 5 pretty typical kind of paths that people get into. Sometimes people will go among those paths, but this is, kind of the ways that people will shape maybe some of the skills that are needed to become an executive director. So you think about that and think, okay, so I'm thinking about becoming an executive director. Let me look at the job descriptions for executive directors. I don't know about you, but when I look at that description, I think, oh my gosh, there is a lot of things. 10 years of senior management experience working board of directors. It can be pretty overwhelming at this point if you look at this. Now, if you're further along career, you might look at this and say, I'm right in line for this, but for a lot of people, it feels like this. It's a little scary. So you might think, okay, let me think of the next path. We talked about programs. So you might look at this and say, okay, that might be a path I would take is going up to programs. You can start to look in there and see, okay, here are some things I would like to do within there. However, it still feels really overwhelming. I'm not ready to be there yet. So what would be something kind of, and you see how I'm deconstructing, I'm going back. You might think, okay, program manager. You look at these descriptions of program managers, and you can see, oh, this is actually in line. I would, after my national service, my other experience, I would be qualified to take this path. This would be a job that I could apply for. And then another, you might say, maybe not yet. Maybe I'm a program assistant. So it's becoming aware of the different paths. And the thing is, the reality in this line of work, in most lines of work, there's not one clear title. So you're going to have to look kind of broadly. It might be program coordinator instead of program assistant. So it's just being mindful of that. But then when you start to look at all of these jobs and you see these are the different paths, then what do you do with this? And again, this takes a little bit of time, but this is what I recommend people to do next, is to do what I call a strength and gap analysis. Looking at what are the common skills that are needed in the pathway I think I'm going to. Again, you might not know 100%, but this is what I have. This is what I need. How could I maybe get it? If you're in the beginning of your service year or you just started a job, you want to stay for a couple of years, what are some ways both in my job, which is, again, that employment side, or enrichment, that I can build out and get some of these skills? You don't have to do this on a total micro level of every single detail that you possibly need, but just getting a general idea of some of this, of, well, okay, these are some things that I need to cultivate. So taking the time to do this. So we've talked about that. Let's actually show you something. If you want to get from here to there, and say there is a manager of corporate social responsibility. This might be a pathway where you go first, social entrepreneurship nonprofit. You might go into more entry-level position doing some program coordination there. And then from there you say progress to corporate partnerships. And then from there you say, I got to go back to graduate school. I need to get an MBA in this. This is what I want to study. And you get an MBA, and then you get a job at a consulting company getting paid a lot of money. But then you realize, oh, it's too much hours. I don't want to do this. I'm not doing what I love. So then maybe you have to take a step back to actually get your foot in the door at a company that you like is doing community, corporate social responsibility, but the job that is available is community relations. But then that opens up the chance to then leapfrog both salary-wise and, say, responsibility-wise. So, again, it's not a clear pathway. It kind of goes around, and you have to keep yourself open to all those possibilities. What we talked about is getting from here to there, where there keeps changing, because you might have one of those jobs and realize you actually want to do something different. So it's being prepared for all of that. So we've got all of this, but then what? how many people, and you feel free to chat in here, think they are more of a generalist? And how many people think they're more of a specialist? Generalist, kind of like multi-tool, you've got a little bit of everything. How many people are like, I know this is exactly what I want to be. I want to be a specialist. This is what I want to be a specialist in. So you start to see, actually, there's a lot of generalists who are coming in. I think a lot of people tend to be generalists. So what does this mean to be a generalist versus a specialist? Generalist might be a program analyst. You kind of work broadly at an organization that works on tons of different issues. Specialist, very specific on Head Start programs. Generalist, you work overall in nonprofits. Specialist, I'm digging in deep on urban issues. Hey, but what happens? How many people want to be both? I saw a couple of both in there. Some people want to be both generalist and specialist. What do you do about that? How do you prepare for that? Or what happens if you want to work in all sectors? Years ago the sectors were very delineated. Now we like to call it sector agnostic. People need to be able to navigate from private, public, nonprofit, and back again. Or what if everything I was talking about, you say, you know what, I want to focus now, but I might want to do many causes. Or the opposite, I want to do many causes now and one cause later. So what do you do? How do you make yourself as marketable as possible that you can be a generalist and a specialist or switch around? So how are some things that you suggest this? This is what I encourage. If anybody's ever played basketball, you never want to take the basketball in your hand and move both feet at once unless you're dribbling. You need to figure out how to pivot, and your career is just like this. Very rarely does someone go, and I'm going to completely jump to a whole new direction. What you want to be doing is thinking about how do you enable that so one foot stays steady and you can pivot around in your career. Some ideas that I would suggest that you think about is, transferable professional skills. Make sure that if you want to be able to pivot, like for example, I have a lot of training skills. When I first moved to D.C., I took a job being a national training manager at an organization that was working on food security. Now, I had never worked on food security issues before. However, the skill sets that I had around training were exactly what they were looking for. In my cover letter and in my interview, I was able to talk about how I was passionate about food security even if I hadn't worked in the field. So that's what I mean by transferable professional skills. Same thing is true around education. You want to think about, do I want to specialize in one specific area, or do I want to get a degree that's a little more broad that opens up some doors? For example, I have students here, we do a Master's of Public Administration or Master's of Public Policy. They can concentrate in a specific area. So when they apply for jobs, they can have that concentration, but if they decide they want to work more broadly, they can take the concentration off because their degree was broad enough. So thinking about how does my education allow me to pivot with all of this. Next thing is around your networks. If you want to go into, specifically urban youth policy and that's all you ever want to do, you might want to just have these deep channels. But say you're not sure. You have your deep channels specifically on urban youth policy, but maybe you really want to look broadly at K through 12 education. That's your wide network. So making sure your network has both depth in some specific areas, but also a breadth that allows you that if you decide you want to try another area, you have connections of people to talk to. You understand that field. Another thing is around an eye for possibilities. Tell a story that's not related to me that actually I think is really telling. One of my friends about 3-4 months ago was itching to get out of your job. And I'm sure you've all had this where you're just like, I'm ready to shift. I'm kind of feeling bored. Started networking with people, doing a lot of informational interviews. And then about a month ago, about 6 weeks ago, she was in a meeting and her boss said, and she works at a federal agency, that they were looking to see if anyone that worked there was interested in doing some detail work, which means that you end up going to another agency for a brief period. She thought that was really interesting to her. She thought that maybe that might be just up her alley. She it wasn't the right opportunity to talk to him right then, but she was aware. About a week later, he does a lot of walkthroughs. That's his management style. She was about to leave, and she saw him walking through, so she stayed at her desk till he popped by, and she said to the boss, this was a boss above her boss, actually, so it wasn't appropriate for her to go to him without this situation. He had stopped by her office. She said, I'm really interested in this detail. This is my background. Turns out she has now been detailed at Department of Health and Human Services. She works on obesity issues in youth, and she now actually is working on Michelle Obama's Let's Move campaign. This all happened within the span of about 4 to 6 months because she was creating possibilities and she took advantage of them. She was ready to move on, and now at dinner with her the night, I've never seen her face light up so much. She's so excited, and who knows what's going to happen from there. But you see what that means about keeping your eye open for what happens and also taking advantage of it. Another thing is being a 5-tool player. People see Moneyball. I recently saw the movie. They talk about someone who hits for power, can get on base, run, throw, and field. What does that mean for career? It means being well-rounded. Somebody who can fit in and navigate in a lot of different places. Kind of, again, going back to the transferable professional skills. Thinking about how can I navigate the field. And then finally, being known for a body of knowledge. That's going to help you pivot because you're going to be relevant. You're going to stand out for other people. You may not know this yet. This might be the known for body of knowledge. It might be something you cultivate as you're further along in your career. But just keep thinking about, what do I want to be known for? How do I want to be the most relevant person in the office or in the organization or in the field? How do you want to be known so that people come to you so that you can pivot easily if you decide you want to shift in a different field? So we talked about some of this pivoting through careers. We've kind of brought this up. The next step to think about, I'm sure is on a lot of people's minds, is education. Do I need to get this? What does this mean? This sign was actually painted on a street, and apparently from what I've heard, took them a while to figure out that it was misspelled. So there's so many different types of degrees out there, and there's so many different ways you can concentrate. And I just put the master's programs up there. I mean, there's certainly, if you want to go back and get another bachelor's or finish up a bachelor's, there's a lot of options out there. So how do you begin to make these decisions? Here are some questions I encourage you to ask, and I deal with this all the time with people coming into graduate school. Is this absolutely necessary to break into the field if you're looking to make a transition into something? Do I need to get this? What if I'm in somewhere and I get an advance? When I went, I didn't go back for my master's until I was 27 because I realized that where I wanted to go within nonprofits, I needed to have a master's degree. And I will make this recommendation because I waited till I was later in career. I didn't go when I was younger. I waited. I had a lot more experience. I applied to a school where I was a little bit, it wasn't like a huge name school. I was really happy with the school. I got a full ride for graduate school. And that's a big issue. And I see people typing in with this around the cost, that if you really think about it and are more strategic about it, you sometimes can get more money because you've taken time. Also, really, are you passionate about it? You're going to be spending several years. If it's a doctorate, it's 5, 6, 7 years. If it's a master's, depending full or part-time, it's 2 to 3 years. Do you really want to learn about this subject? Is now the right time to do it? And obviously the big one is, can you afford it? Really think about both in terms of the immediate when you're in school, but also what decisions is this going to affect when you're out of school? Can you afford the student loans? Do you want to wait and finish up and pay for your undergraduate and get those loans paid off before graduate school? So take some time to think before this. And then I say 4 questions to really ask yourself. Take the time to ask. Very easy to fall into this trap. I finished AmeriCorps. I don't want to deal with the real world. It's so much easier to go to graduate school. Another question. Is this something that my parents want me to do? Is this something my partner wants me to do? Is this something I think other people want me to do that's going to make them happy, but I really don't want to do it? We have a lot of students in our program that started law school after a semester and realized that that was someone else's expectation and not their own, and they wasted a semester of school. It's easy when you can't find a job to think I want to go to graduate school. It's not a good source of it's not a good answer to this. And then finally, going back to if I don't know what I want to do, am I just going to go because I don't know what I want to do? Easy traps to fall into. take your time for graduate school. It's what I had started to do when I was thinking about getting the other master's in education, and I'm so glad I took the time to think about, is this really what I want, before I made those decisions. And we've got some great sources here for all of you. Places, and again, reminder that this will be up. The education links are on there, and you can also access this later. What I tried to do is cull down the ones that I thought really were helpful. There's a lot of information out there, so these are ones that you can go to and get, hone it down. And I'm going to turn it over to Liz, who's going to highlight some of the resources on Vista campus.
Great. Thanks, Denise. So there's a really fantastic course on the campus that is about the Education Award, and it takes all different angles to it, about loan deferment and paying off before, after school, all different combinations. So we really encourage you. It's just edaward.org. Actually, you can get to it that way as well. So this is a really comprehensive course that will answer, hopefully, any question that you do have about the Ed Awards. There's also a great opportunity coming up through our friends at AmeriCorps Alums. They are offering for the first time a virtual grad school fair. It's coming up in December. I believe it's December the 12th from 1 to 4 p.m., and that's a drop-in as you can basis. So obviously you can access this from anywhere in the world, really. So you can go to their website at AmeriCorpsAlums.org and sign up to be a part of that grad school fair. So that is timely, and we encourage you to participate in that if you're debating going back to school. There's also, we don't have a slide up here on it, but if you go to nationalservice.gov/edawardmatch, you will see a listing of schools that offer some combination of benefits, whether it's matching the full amount of schooling or just partial for AmeriCorps alumni. And that list is growing every day. If there's a school that you want to go to that doesn't currently match, you may want to make your case and go ahead and tell the administrators about AmeriCorps and what you've done, and who knows, they might want to sign up and be a part of this effort. So again, that's on nationalservice.gov/edawardmatch, and it's in the chat box there.
And
so, yeah,
Liz, one thing I just want to add with this is, and I was involved with this in Heller, and one of my thing that I'm most proud of is that when I was at the Heller School at Brandeis, we actually started scholarships that were full scholarships for AmeriCorps alum, and I think that this is also growing as they've been trying to grow the Ed Award, and I know the Corporation for National Service, National Community Service, and AmeriCorps alum is working really hard. So in addition to match, there are a lot of schools that are very much recognizing the value of being a Vista, being an AmeriCorps, and will offer, in addition to just the match, full rides or much more money. So really take the time to dig in if you decide graduate school is right for you, to take the time to look for those, because deadlines for those are often before other deadlines, and you need to do a little bit more for those applications. But, we talk here at our school, at our graduate school, about the millions of dollars that are lost around the country every year because people don't take the time to look at ways to pay for graduate school that are out there. We have one program here, a Scottish Rite Fellowship, that people find out when they dig around that they actually have a Scottish background that they would never know. So I just want to encourage people to take the time to dig in deep if they think graduate school is for them. Yep. Do you want me to keep going, Liz, to the next one now?
Yeah.
Great. Okay. So here we just want to, I've told you a little bit of my story. If we have a chance, I'll tell you a little bit more. But Liz and Robin, we're just going to share a little bit to, again, kind of lend some color to kind of what we've been talking about, and then we're going to be going into some Q&A. So, Liz, I'll turn it over to you first.
Super, yes. So I joke with Denise as we were planning this that I actually really needed this webinar when I was at Vista back in the early 90s as well. But what she said really just rings so true. And I would say that I definitely fall into the generalist category, as so many of you all do as well. But I would like to say that I've had a common thread throughout all of my jobs so far in my career, and that would probably be communications, marketing, outreach, and that way I've been able to pivot in both the public sector, the private sector, and I've been able to start my own business as well. And it really was the combination of those skills And then the resourcefulness and flexibility skills that I learned as a Vista, it really has helped to carry me. So after I finished my service in Lake Charles, Louisiana, at a domestic violence shelter, I moved to Washington, D.C., and was able to work for the Points of Light Foundation. And through that work, I started working with corporations and helping them to develop their employee volunteer programs. And I started to get really intrigued by corporations and what they were doing to give back to communities. And so I decided that it would be a good idea to work in the for-profit sector for a little while and see what that was like. So I started working for Barnes & Noble. At the time, it was the big box stage, and they were popping up all over the country, and there was a lot of momentum behind it. And I was able to do community relations for a store here in the D.C. area, got to meet all kinds of amazing authors and do community outreach into the schools and give books away and all kinds of fun stuff. And then from there, it was the late 90s, and it was the .com era. And so I thought, well, geez, that looks like fun. I wasn't trying to become a millionaire, but I just wanted to check it out. So I was able to enter that arena as a marketing coordinator, and really had a very interesting time. And then, as we all know, things started to turn, and I was able to learn about business development because they needed people to be able to bring more business in because the dot bomb was starting to happen. So I learned a whole new set of skills, which was how to go out to other companies and try to convince them that they needed our business to help them start a website. So that got me to learn a whole other set of skills. And then after that, I decided it was time to return to the nonprofit arena. I thought, you know what, my passion is really back with the nonprofit. And so I thought literacy is so much at the heart of so many social issues. And I found out about an opportunity at an organization called First Book, and was able to work there and did a variety of things, including being their first communications person. And then I ended up leading their First Book University and doing trainings for volunteers across the country. It was a very entrepreneurial organization, and so I got the bug, and that's when I decided to start a yoga apparel business. And I did that because it combined my sweet spot of I love yoga, I love fashion, and I had these skills of being able to be resourceful and finding the people that I needed in order to do these jobs that needed to get done in order to actually create a product, bring it to market, and let the world know that this was available. So that was a great experience. And then I found out about this position here at Vista, and I always believed very strongly in the program, and it just aligned up really well. And so I decided to come here and work for AmeriCorps Vista, and it's really a great place to be. And I've seen in the Q&A there are a few questions about how you can have your Vista service count towards a federal career. So if you do decide to enter the federal government, you can have the time that you did serve as a Vista apply to your federal career and your retirement ultimately. So that's a snapshot just to reiterate all the points that Denise has made, and I will turn it over to Robin.
Great. Thanks, Liz. I'm more of a recent Vista, but I originally went into college thinking that I wanted to work for the United Nations, and spent my entire time in international relations, and the economy dropped, and I am from Lansing, Michigan originally, and watching what the fall of the auto industry did to my city was something I felt was very heartfelt during my college career, and I decided to use all of the skills that I had learned, really focusing on international aid and international development, and actually see about trying my hand at really working in the community that had given so much to me and grown up. So I took a Vista position to focus on domestic work, and ended up getting in a service learning program for Detroit Public Schools. And that kind of started my career path for a while. I worked in service learning first in K through 12 and then civic engagement. And during that time, I actually met the CEO of Campaign Consultation at a workshop that my organization was doing, and I had given a great 30-second speech, and he had given my card. And the thing that I always say about networking is, networking happens all the time, and you walk away with cards. One of the things he always says about me is that he had given his cards out to many people he had met in workshops, and I was the first one to keep in contact. So over the years, I really enjoyed what they did in communication and training, and so I would always come visit their office whenever I was in Baltimore. And I had decided that what I was really passionate about was since I've been 14, I've been self-taught on HTML. And started doing a lot of work with social media and website creation, and that was something that was always a passion of mine that I would do kind of as a side business while I was doing service learning, and decided that was something I wanted to do full time. So I had lunch with the people these relationships I had developed at Campaign Consultation, and said, hey, I'm thinking about leaving my job and am looking to do very similar work to what you're doing. And we went through a variety of interviews, but I ended up getting hired based on that relationship that actually was fostered at a random conference that I had attended about 2.5 years ago. So one of the things that I would say in my career, what has been really important is to foster relationships even if you don't think there's an opportunity at that moment, or that it's going to be exactly what you want to do, because you never know down the road if your career if you pivot again, and now you have that great relationship that can help you do that and pivot into a new career.
Thanks, Robin. That actually gets at the whole thing about the wide and deep. I love that. The one thing I'm going to add about my own, because I'm not going to go back through, because you've been hearing the little stories of me before we go into the Q&A. Is so, as I said, my background started with national service. I taught in the woods of Montana. I was a Smokey the Bear in Acadia National Park. I quit my job to teach English in Nepal. I really, really amazing, diverse career path. I've run several AmeriCorps programs. I always had the best job, and I thought, oh, my God, this job title rocks. It was Project Manager, War on Poverty. Doesn't get any cooler than that if you want to be in this line of work. And was working on it, and unfortunately the organization that was funding our university ran out of money. And I was out of a job. And I had been doing a lot of things on the side, but didn't really catch all of how it was going to pull together until they offered me a position at the Heller School to run the career services, which is all about social policy. And the way they framed it to me is they said, well, we don't know how long the job's going to last. We don't know what you're going to do, and it's a $10,000 pay cut. And I'm thinking, hey, sign me up. No, actually, I was thinking, oh, my God, what am I getting myself into? And I resisted, and I didn't know if this was because it felt really off the path of what I was doing. And I took the positions. I didn't have a job. And, for about 4 to 6 weeks, I really struggled with it. And as I began to look and see, at the time I was offered this position, I was doing training work at the time. I was getting trained as a life coach. I was doing everything. If you looked back at my career and we talk about giving those transferable skills, I was doing all of this work, just not in that exact job title. And everybody else around me knew that this was exactly what would make me happy. And it took a while for me to kind of figure out that was right. And they ended up, fortunately, making the job permanent. I was able to figure out what I was going to do. And they found the extra money, which actually came out of a project we were involved with around Eli Siegel, which is one of the founders of AmeriCorps. So through a project we were doing with that. So it ended up working itself out. But it's just a story about how you need to be prepared. And sometimes you end up resisting it until you realize I got away from the shoulds. I thought, oh, I should have the cool job title. I should be doing poverty work. This is exactly what I do. And instead I realized that I get to now work with people using my strengths, which I've learned what I'm good at, and I've also learned what I'm not good at, within the right organizational culture. I love university culture. And it's causes I love inspiring people to see their potential. I'm actually now continuing to grow and learn. I'm taking a year-long program in positive psychology. So I'm constantly thinking about this. I love what I do, but I'm like, what's going to be next? So, my career has been really wonderful and integrated and crazy, very interesting and crazy. And people look at it, and I wouldn't trade it for any moment. But I've always been prepared for that pivot. And I don't know how, but I just always have been thinking about, what skills am I doing, which kind of goes back all the way to the beginning, thinking about that even if you have so many things you want to do or you're not sure what you want to do, if you're just preparing yourself for all those options, you're going to make it there. And that you follow your heart. I'm such a big believer in that, and you follow your heart and you follow your passions. and you follow your values. So we're just going to highlight a few next steps that we encourage people to do. I kind of went through the workshop and really pulled out a few things that I would say, okay, you're not going to be able to do everything. I know you're not. I'm always all about making it easy. But just set up a search. Start getting some job boards. Start reviewing postings. Just start gauging, your gut reaction to things. Plan a couple networking meetings for the next month. Say by the end of the year, I'm going to do 3 networking meetings before 2014. Start looking at LinkedIn this week. Go to the grad school fair and think about the webinar, the Using Your Education webinar on December 3rd. Here are some just easy things to start, like low-hanging fruit to get yourself going. Obviously, would love to have you spend time to go back through the presentation and pull out things that are relevant to you, but here's some good next steps. So at this point, we'd love to open it up to questions and hear what people have to say and to see if we can kind of address some things that maybe weren't addressed already or clarify some points.
Great. Thanks, Denise. Jeff, our operator, can you remind folks how to ask a question through the phone, please?
If you would like to ask a question, please press star 1. Please unmute your phone and record your name clearly when prompted. Your name is required to introduce your question. To withdraw your question, please press star 2. Again, if you would like to ask a question, please press star 1.
Great, thank you. So we're going to go ahead and take a few questions in the Q&A while folks have a chance to dial in. And as well, I just wanted to remind people that you can also ask a question through VoIP. So just raise that little hand above the PowerPoint presentation, and one of our hosts will be in touch with you to help set up your microphone and make sure that you can ask your question. Okay, Denise, there have been a few questions coming in through the Q&A. There have been several about non-competitive eligibility, and I just want to address that by saying that we're not focusing on non-competitive eligibility in this webinar. There is a great course on the campus, and that link has been provided in the Q&A box. I will just briefly say that the reason why it's helpful, Rachel is wondering how helpful is it when searching and applying for jobs. The reason why non-competitive eligibility is helpful, and U.S. Vistas, not all other AmeriCorps programs, in CCC and State National, only U.S. Vista members through AmeriCorps have this benefit, as well as if you do Peace Corps. It basically puts you in the same category as if you already worked for the federal government. So it doesn't guarantee you the job. It just helps to put your resume in a stack of folks that also have the advantage of already working for the federal government. So again, more detail can be found through the course on the campus. So I just wanted to mention that. Yeah, go ahead.
The one thing I want to add with this, because the non-competitive eligibility can be very, very complicated, so really look and spend some time with it. Hiring for federal jobs, I'm trained as a federal career coach, and I went through a training at a place called the Resume Place. Take some time to understand the federal process and the federal resume. It is very, very different than how you would apply for regular jobs. I see so many people that are interested in working in the federal government that take the time to just quickly find a job. They do that, and then they don't understand how to actually apply. It's much more detail-oriented. You have to get onto the best qualified list, even with this non-competitive eligibility. So otherwise, I see people who do that, and they're like, I've just sent it out, and it feels like it's a black hole. Want to really understand another great source for that is called GovLoop. Has some guides on how to apply for federal jobs. Again, it's GovLoop, I think, .com. GovLoop, I'm not sure, but just look for GovLoop. Has some great resources on this, because this is a wonderful thing, the non-competitive eligibility, but then besides that, I want to make sure you know how to maximize your chances for landing that job.
Thanks, Denise. And Ngozi had a question about wondering about federal opportunities in the chat, so that really does help to answer his question there. And as well, I would add that you can, USA Jobs is where all of the federal postings are. You can create a profile on there. So anything that you would want to apply for that is a federal position would be posted on usajobs.gov. So you'd have to create a profile there. And that does also include, please don't disregard coming to work for us here at the Corporation for National and Community Service. We have almost half of our staff here at Vista have served before, and many of the other folks around the different departments served. So that will put you in a great position if you do apply for a job here at CNCS.
And I'm sorry to tag on one more thing. Not certain organizations, certain agencies are actually not held to having to post on USA Jobs, so make sure you take a little time. We're not going to get into this now, but if you search online, you can find those. Things like the State Department will often just post just for them. I think the Treasury. So you want to actually look at, if you're interested in a specific organization, take some time to look at that agency. There more and more are on USA Jobs, but some of them, because of their exemptions, don't have to post there. So just to cover all of your bases, look at specific agencies if you really want to be there.
Exactly. And along the same theme, Sarah is wondering, are we as Vistas considered federal employees? Do we mark yes if applying for federal jobs? Technically, you're not a federal employee, so you cannot say that you have already been a federal employee. However, identify yourself as an AmeriCorps Vista member and that you've been a part of a national service program. And hopefully that will mean something to the hiring manager. All right, so moving along to a slightly different topic, Jeff is wondering, I've noticed a lot of the schools that match the Siegel Ed Award are in areas like public policy and social work. You are correct, Jeff. He asks, after the year of service, how should someone who's interested transition into a degree like that if their background is completely different while still coming across as a competitive candidate?
For degrees in, the question is around for degrees in public policy and public administration?
No, I think if they're not going into something like that, if they are wanting to do something different, but they've served, as a Vista, so they have that background, but how can they still be competitive while going for an advanced degree in something other than public policy and social work?
I mean, it's going to vary per program, but it's really understanding the specifics. It goes back to kind of that third leg on the table, that enrichment, that if you're, say, looking to get into a field, say, of public health, and you haven't worked in public health, you want to do some volunteer work in there, you want to do some pro bono work, you want to be a part of associations, you want to try to expand your skill set with that, and sometimes you want to take the time to maybe not go right into graduate school because you might not be as competitive and you might not get into the program that you want to get into, or you might not have, might not get as much money. I read an article for AmeriCorps alums every month, this Career Coach column I encourage you all to look at, and for AmeriCorps alums does this, and I wrote one on stepping stones. So if you're looking to make, to go to a completely different field, think about the stepping stones that you need to take to get there. So, if you really want to get into something, say an MBA in nonprofit management, and you don't really have the business skills, you might take some additional coursework at a community college. So taking those steps are really critical.
Great. Thanks, Denise. Carly has a similar type of question. So, Denise, you've been talking about getting a nonprofit position after Vista, but Carly doesn't like working for nonprofits. That's good, because a lot of times it's figuring out what you don't like to do. So the question is, do you have any advice on how to promote the skills that they're learning in a way that will be valuable and outstanding for a for-profit organization?
I definitely do, but I do want to give one caveat. I just want to say, because I often hear this from people, is that I don't want to work at a nonprofit because they've had one or two experiences at a nonprofit that haven't been good. Don't let that be a blanket statement for all nonprofits. There are some nonprofits that are run like businesses. There are some nonprofits that are more stable than businesses. So just don't let, I've had some experiences at nonprofits that I could see if that was somebody's only experience, they would be totally turned off by them. I work at a university. That's actually considered a nonprofit. So I always like to make that caveat to make sure that just a couple experiences, that might be you don't want to work at a small nonprofit. You might want to work at a larger nonprofit that's more stable. So that's just one thing. The other thing around how you market yourself, that kind of gets back to a question around resumes and experience. I've actually done a lot of webinars before, and you can check for these. I think we have them on the Vista, your site, on resumes. And that's how when you're listing your job experience out, you might want to do what I call a hybrid resume, where you focus. I don't like functional resumes, but maybe under your Vista experience, experience, you take all the accomplishments you have and divide it out by a couple different categories that are applicable to where you're looking. Like, say if you're looking to get a job at a private sector and they're looking for someone with management and communications experience, you might use those as subcategories under your Vista experience and then put the accomplishments that relate specifically for that. It's also where your professional profile is huge, and that which is the summary at the top of your resume, where you message maybe that you're looking to bridge your nonprofit experience within a private sector organization. It's not an objective statement, but it talks about your transferable skills. It's where your cover letter is invaluable, and it's where networking is important, where you talk to somebody on how to get your foot in the door. So it's really, again, being able to understand the field and to shift the messaging of your resume to be applicable for that sector. Often that sector, private sector resumes, private sector are looking very much it's accomplishment driven. So thinking about how to shift maybe something that feels a little bit more gray into something that feels very black and white to them, where they can see the measurable results of your work.
Super. All right. Thanks, Denise. Holly has a question. So we've been talking about graduate programs, but what about guidance on four-year education? She has an AS degree, and I'm unsure of which I should focus on because of my age, 29, and lack of experience. Friends, the number one reason I joined Vista. So any guidance on four-year education?
In terms of how to make a decision?
She's put this in the chat, so maybe, Holly, can you clarify a little bit more for us so we know what exactly you're looking for in terms, perhaps it's the degree that she's wondering what degree to focus on for undergrad, I believe.
I mean, I think the same questions are true that we were talking, if that is the question, and I'll look and see if I see her question comes in at all, see if there's any additional clarification.
Yeah, she just said yes.
Oh, okay, great. So it's the same questions to be asking yourself, and it's the same process, I would say. It's look and see what degrees people in the field that you want to be going into have gotten undergraduate degrees in. And a lot of times, I got an undergraduate degree in political science. I thought it was very interesting. Do I think it's the most marketable? If you have an opportunity, particularly you said you're 29, to be thinking about very specific marketable skills that are going to enable you to go further. For example, if you want to work in the nonprofit world, you might not traditionally think, but say a business degree might be huge, because then you're going to have a business lens to go work in nonprofit. If, say, you want to work and do program evaluation at organizations, maybe having a degree in mathematics or statistics are going to be helpful. You could also get a degree, say, focus on something around psychology if you want to go work and do community organizing, having those kind of a degree. It really goes back. It's the same thing for graduate school as undergraduate. Talk to people and look and see. Take the time, look at job postings, look at LinkedIn profiles, and talk to people and see what are going to be the most marketable skills that are going to enable me to get to where I want to go, particularly as you're looking at your age, that you're ready to get this degree under your belt, that are enabling me to do it as quickly as possible. Whether it's a program that's going to allow part-time, that you're working at the same time. So I'm not sure if that fully captures what she was looking for, but Holly, if you have additional clarification, please feel free to put that in the question, or if we didn't fully get at your question.
Super. Jeff, do we have any questions that have come in over the phone?
Yes, we do.
Oh, great.
Lauren, your line is open.
Oh, I'm sorry. My question was actually already answered.
Oh, great. We were so excited to have everybody in this generation seems to be very comfortable, even though we have a variety of ages. Many people are very comfortable in the Q&A, so it's always nice to hear somebody. But, okay, Lauren, we're glad that your question was answered.
Yep, great. Thank you.
Any other questions, Jeff?
At this time, there are no questions.
Okay, super. Maura has asked, and I'll take this one because I know Denise and Robin, and I can answer this. Her question is, do any of you have children, and how did that play into the various career paths? I do have a young child, and we could have a whole other webinar on that. But I think as with your career decisions, a lot of times you'll know when it's the right time. I think it really helps to have already been done with school, or if you do want to go back to school and you're able to have a young child and go to school part-time and not work, that is really lucky, and if that's possible, that's great. I happened to wait quite a long time before I had children, and because of that, I was more established in my career, and it really was pretty manageable when I came back to work. So it's obviously a very personal decision, and if you want to talk about it more, we can take it offline. But that is very something to consider. So thank you for bringing that up, Maura.
And the one thing I want to add with that, Liz, thank you so much, living and breathing that, is that's where you think about organizational culture. Types of places where you have that flexibility. Both of my sisters, one of my sisters stayed at a university. She's been there now for 17 years because it allowed her a lot of flexibility. When her children were younger, she was able to work 4-day work weeks and 2 months off in the summer. She's progressed in her career. Now she's full-time and has gone from, I think she was a coordinator of student services to now the dean of students at a university now that her children are older, but she was very mindful to think about that with where she is. My other sister ran her own training and development business while her children were younger, and now that her children are a little bit older, she took a full-time job somewhere else. So it's really thinking about organizational culture that will allow you that flexibility that you'd be looking for with children.
Those are great points. Thanks, Denise. Lauren is asking, can you offer any wisdom regarding starting a new job or career versus staying on for another year of Vista?
That's a great question, Lauren. So I get that a lot with students here that are at an internship and like, do I stay on into a job? So there's a couple things to think about. You really, first and foremost, and you want to ask them, what is the plan that you would have for me in this job? Like, if you're going to be viewed in the same way, if the job is going to be exactly the same of what you did as a Vista, you might want to think twice about it. If they're going to be saying to you, you know what, we really want you to transition into X, Y, and Z, and you're going to be growing into this, then you think this is an advantage. It goes back when we talked about doing a strength and gap analysis. Think about if I stay for another 2-3 years, is this going to give me the skills to get me to the next job? An advantage is they already know you. You might have a lot of autonomy and flexibility there to expand your job. Disadvantage I often see from people, and this is where both the organization and you come into play, is for them to see you as a full staff member. Sometimes when people make the transition either from an intern or from a national service into a job, they're still viewed as kind of not a full staff person. So it's making sure the organization is open to that, but you also have to do that. There's a reason they say dress for the job you want. You have to come into your own with that and present yourself in a certain way. Certain organizations, no matter what you do, are going to fight that, but certain organizations are going to be really open. So you want to weigh the possibility of what that job will look like, what the salary is going to look like. Make sure you're asking for the right amount in salary, do the homework, and position yourself well for that transition. So again, it goes down to what are going to be the long-term benefits, not just the immediate. Like, it might be easy to take that job, but will the work that you would do for the span of the next several years, with the responsibilities that they would give you, the title, put you and position you well for the next position?
Sure. All right. So we've been getting a few questions that have to do with resumes, and part of the reason why we love Denise is because she's very good at many of these topics, and she's already led a webinar for us on resume writing. So make sure that you check that out on the Vista campus. We'll make sure you guys have that link. But there is one question having to do with resumes that I do think you might be able to answer in this context. First of all, Jackie says, thank you for a great presentation. What ideas do you have in terms of ensuring a hiring manager will see your resume and or cover letter? In my experience, this is the most difficult part.
That's great. And thank you, Jackie, for the nice words. A couple things. It's a great question. First of all, there's a statistic out that I love quoting because people are shocked when they hear this. It came out recently through a study that was done that said 90% of people think their resumes are good. Recruiters would rate 5% as standing out. So what you think might be good is very likely not in that 5%. So take the time to do that. Another big thing on how to get it to actually notice, this is where networking comes in. I just was meeting with a student this morning who applied for an internship. She just sent the letter in, and I said, oh, did you check our LinkedIn group to see if we know anybody there? She goes, no, I didn't think about that. We checked. We have a student who's actually interning at that exact organization in the position she wants. If she had reached out to that student first, had a conversation, that student could have both put in a good word for her. She could have also, in the introduction in her cover letter, the first paragraph of your cover letter is what I consider your virtual handshake. And it's much better than saying, I'm applying for this job, versus after speaking with Jane Smith, one of your colleagues who recommended I apply for this position. That's a much stronger, quote-unquote, virtual handshake. So do your research to see if you know anybody first. In an ideal world, you want somebody to also maybe be able to forward your resume onto you. This is where LinkedIn can come in, or through networks that you might know somebody that you can email them and say, I know that I know you from this position, or someone else recommended, I'm applying for a position at your organization. Do you have any advice on how I might frame the cover letter or what they're looking for? This gives them an opportunity to easily say, no, there's nothing I can do, or here's the advice I have for you. In an ideal world, you want them to say, here's the advice I have for you, and I know this person who recommended you. If they're recommended you, I think highly of you. Send me your cover letter and resume. I will forward it to the hiring manager. So you want to figure out how to work those channels, so both making sure that your documents are in that 5%, your cover letter and resume. There's so much stuff out there that is not sharp. Really take the time to do that, but also equally take the time to see if you know anybody at the organization before you apply to give you insight, and hopefully to be able to forward it along to a hiring manager. One other quick thing that just came on with that is that, even if they don't list the name of the hiring manager on the job description, call the organization, call the front desk and say, I'm applying for this position. I wondered if you might be able to share with me who the hiring manager is. That cover letter will stand out that says, Dear Denise Riebman, Dear Ms. Riebman, versus one that will say, Dear Hiring Manager, because it'll say to me, she went above and beyond. That's the kind of employee I want to have.
And make sure you spell people's names right.
Oh, yes. It's amazing how often that happens.
Exactly,
oh my
exactly.
God.
Well,
Have like 4 people read your cover letter and resume. Another little trick of the trade, just when you say that, is I tell people to read your cover letter paragraph, sentence by sentence backwards, not the actual words backwards, but you're going to see, because it's easy when you're reading it top to bottom if things don't sound right. If you read it backwards, it's just going to tighten your letter when you realize those sentences and the way that they sound individually. Just a little trick of the trade.
Super, thank you. I think you've answered Brittany's question, because she was asking for advice or finding job opportunities and fellowships and so forth, and does Vista have any resources on this? So you've definitely, LinkedIn and everything that you just said, I think is really helpful, and I would just add that Vista does have resources on this on the campus, on the job board forum, as I mentioned, and then also AmeriCorps Alums has a job board on their website. I don't know if you have anything else that you would want to add to that, Denise.
20% of jobs on average are posted, Brittany. 20%. I think the statistic is actually, this is an old statistic. I think it's actually gotten a lot higher with the advent of all the social media and jobs being posted on Twitter and LinkedIn groups and Facebook and, all the different job boards. So absolutely, the number is a little bit higher. Still, the vast majority of jobs never make it to a job board, or once they make it to the job board, they've actually already identified the person they want to hire, which is why, even though it's messier and more time-consuming on the forefront, on the front side of it, networking and relationship building is the way to go, because then you're going to hear about opportunities before anybody else does. So there are so many job boards out there. We've done some workshops on this and some resources depending on the specific field you're looking to get into, and we just listed a bunch of them. But really talking to people, finding out, so-and-so is writing a grant for this, or this opportunity might be popping up. A statistic I recently showed people that in a workshop on salary negotiation is that it costs an organization on average, now this is on average, about $6,000 to hire a candidate. That's a lot of money an organization has to put out for recruitment, for interviewing. This counts in like all the staff time and everything that it takes to hire somebody and train. Think about how you could save the organization money if, because of a relationship you have with someone at the organization, or you've reached out to somebody, that they find the right candidate and don't have to go through all of that. It might cost them $2,000 to go through HR with you versus $6,000. So you think about the time and effort you're saving them to make yourself the right candidate.
There you go. All right, we have a question that's come through VoIP. Robin, do you want to cue that person up?
Once again, to ask a question, please press star 1.
Robin, do we have the question through VoIP ready? If not, we can go back to the Q&A. We've got still lots of questions in here.
Okay. I do have, if Sarah is not able to connect, I do have her question, actually.
Okay.
So her question is there any advice that you would have on what to look out for when planning your second year of service?
I guess the question is going to vary whether or not it's a second year at the same site or a second year at the same site. Typically, a second year is great if they are looking to build additional responsibility. I often feel like, and I'm not sure about Sarah's age, but a lot of national service members are young in their career, and it's hard for them to ask for what they want. And when you talk to them about doing a second year, you want to be mindful of what the organization's needs are, but you need to go in there saying, this is what I want to get out of the second year. I used to run a Vista program in Maine, and I had a lot of Vistas who stayed on for a second year. And before they worked with their community partners, we sat and we said, where do you want to go afterwards? What skill sets do you want to bring? Part of it was in their site, and also part of it as a second year. We were part of a large core of 35. I gave them additional responsibilities within planning and supporting the core. So if that's an area you want to get into. So it's having those hard conversations with somebody and saying, this is what, and framing it in a way that it's not about you. You remember, none of this is ever about you. It's always about what you can give back to them, and saying, you could say, I really can see myself, after I finish up here, becoming a manager of programs. I would love to learn this, this, and this over the course of the next year. I feel like this would be in line with what would help the organization. If I could do this, this, and this would be beneficial for you all. It would grow the organization, and it would grow my skill sets. How does that sound? It's, again, taking yourself to the next level and positioning yourself in that way. I'll answer it in this way also because you, as a female, asking this question. There's a great book called Women Don't Ask, and it has to do with salary negotiations in a lot of ways, but it also has to do with how women and period just don't ask for what they want, and how that can be detrimental. Financially, it shows that women lose about $1 million over the course of their lifetime because they don't ask financially. Now, if you're going for a second year of Vista, you're not going to have the flexibility on that. But the whole basis of the story came out of the fact that the men at her university were asking for the teaching assistantships, and the women were waiting for them to be posted. So don't wait for someone to tell you what you should do in your second year. Think about what you want to get out of that year.
Great. All right. So we're conscious of the time. We've only got about 7 more minutes, and there's still a lot more questions in the Q&A. So we're going to try to get through as many as we can. Ngozi says, "I'm done with education. I have an MBA and a PhD in organizational leadership. I know what I want, but I think I have serious problems marketing myself. Is there a resource out there for me?"
That's great. So I definitely think you've got the education down pat there. There is a lot of stuff out there, and what I think is, I keep going back to this, but it's really the marketing comes down to networking and wording. And I'll give an example is that when I was at Brandeis, I had someone applying for a position that actually didn't even need a master's, and she had a PhD. And she was very clear in her cover letter where she named the elephant in the room on why she wanted that position and how it fit in with her career development, as well as talking about how she would add to the organization. But so her resume grabbed my attention, but I immediately thought overqualified, she's going to be asking for too much money, which is part of the challenge that you're going to have with an MBA and a PhD, is they're going to think that what you're asking for financially is going to be out of their range. So you want to make sure that you don't address the financial situation in the cover letter, but that you are aware of, you can broadly say you're aware of what the organization is offered and what this position will be, and that you're looking for this. I can't say it enough that it really goes back to you building relationships with people, because a perfect resume is a blank piece of paper. Because the minute they see your resume, they're going to judge you. The minute they look at your LinkedIn profile, they're going to judge you by what you see there. So you need to get people to get to know who you are. And in a lot of situations in that, you might be looking for someone to design a position for you.
Great. Daniel wants to know, what's the best way to choose a career mentor?
That's a great question. I actually would not use the word mentor. I like to use the term board of advisors. You don't want to just have one person. You have many different needs, and thinking about people who fit different needs. You might have someone who's a little bit further in your career, so thinking about, okay, is there someone in the same line of work as I am? Is there someone that's completely objective from a different line of work that can give me perspective? So I usually recommend that you have about 3 or 4 people that both can support you but push you. It is not effective to have a career mentor by somebody that coddles you or says yes to everything. Like, that's great. You want someone that's going to look at your resume and say, that's great, and let's completely bring this around to a whole different direction and push you in a new way. So really thinking about that, a great way to identify them in addition to your own current network is going to associations, going to different meetings, connecting with people there. And as you identify people, you don't want to use that term, say, oh, can you be my mentor? But just kind of like saying to them, I'd love to stay in touch as I navigate this career. You seem to have a great perspective on it. Can I circle back with you and build up those relationships? But again, don't think about it as a career mentor. Think about it as what I like to say, a board of advisors, 3 to 4, 5, maybe 5 people that kind of fit in different areas of your life and can push you in different ways and encourage you in different ways. You need those cheerleaders, absolutely.
Super. Cheryl wants to know when should we start looking for new jobs? Is there a recommended timeline?
Well, of course I'm going to say you should always be out there building relationships because you don't know. You absolutely don't know when there's going to be opportunities, so you always want to do that. In terms of the nuts and bolts of actually applying for positions, depends on the sector. For federal jobs, you want to give it a little bit more time, maybe 4 to 5 months, depending on the process, because sometimes those take a long time to go through. And that can be true for not just federal, but state and local. Often the hiring process for those can be anywhere from 4 to 6 months for public sector jobs. Otherwise, typically rule of thumb to really start digging in really deep is, say, 3 to 4 months out, really start putting in a lot of jobs, maybe around 3 months out, really putting in a lot of the cover letters and resumes to get that, for that transition. And also have a transition plan ready. Like if you don't have a job at graduation, while you're doing that, start reaching out to temp agencies, start looking at part-time opportunities. See at your organization, could you stay on as a contract position? Is there an organization you've been partnering with that you could stay on and be able to extend? So I say have a plan A, plan B, and a plan C. Also think about when you're applying for jobs, if you have the dream jobs that, 3 months out, you're going to put 75% of your time into those dream jobs, but if it's a month out and you're not getting any takers, you might reduce that to 25% of your time and spend 75% of your time on the B type of jobs that's going to land you a position right afterwards.
All right. We'll just have time for a couple more. Jeff asks, the AmeriCorps alum group hasn't added me on LinkedIn yet. I tried to join about 2 weeks ago. Am I missing something? I would say to go ahead and go to the AmeriCorps alums website and contact them through that way and tell them what you're trying to do. Denise, would you add anything?
Yeah, no, that's a problem. They should not have done that. I'm part of AmeriCorps alums, and hopefully it's just a minor little thing, but definitely shoot them off another email. I'm sorry about that. That should not be. They should be responding immediately on that. So
exactly.
Thanks. Sorry about that.
Jeff, do we have any more questions that have come in over the phone?
At this time, there are no questions.
Okay. All right. Well, we can still answer a couple of questions, but I wanted to go ahead and open up the evaluation. So we really encourage you all to fill this out. It's really important for us to get feedback from you so we know what has been useful information for you and what else you would like to learn through these webinars. So if you can take a couple minutes and fill that out, we really appreciate it. And I think we probably should, let's see if there's any other questions. Hannah wants to know, any suggestions for cover letters or applying when you don't know someone on the inside?
Write the best cover letter you can possibly write. Basically, you want to think about it's not about you. Don't walk them through your resume. Again, I would look at, we have a guide on resumes. I actually haven't done, maybe that's one for the future. We do a webinar on cover letters. But make sure what you want to do is you want to make it so easy for them to say, this is what we need, this is what they offer, and make them connect the dots. It's not about what you want. It's about what they need. Make it so that you are so perfectly aligned. Don't use the cliche terms. If you look online, you can see all the different cliche terms. I'm, a self-starter. I have strong written and oral communication skills. These are the generic cliche terms. Really think about what makes you unique before you even do anything. Like, why would everybody, I don't care if you are just starting out, you have skill sets and your innate personality that makes you special, that makes you stand out. And think about what that is and then how to message that and write it really well. I can't emphasize that enough. And just think about, what makes you compelling. I like to say the resume tells, the cover letter sells, and the interview compels them to hire you. So that's what you want to be thinking as you message through all of it.
And as you pivot throughout your career.
Exactly. And getting from here to there where there keeps changing, have fun with it. I know it's stressful with finding a job and figuring out what you want. It's a process, and you have to embrace the messiness of the process. If you fight it, you're going to be exhausting yourself. If you just say, this is what it is, let me enjoy it, let me enjoy the ride, it's amazing how much more is going to open up to you because you don't have that weight on you, that you're really looking at it with a sense of excitement about your future and creating an impact.
There you go. As Travis says in the chat room, you go through those steps and you, now I've lost it because it's...
Tell, sells, compels, and pivot. I see what he has on there. I love that. That's fantastic.
That's great. Well, Denise, thank you so much. We really appreciate you being a part of these webinars, and I know that our Vista members are grateful for the information that you impart on them, and we wish everybody good luck as you pivot through your Vista service year as well as your career. So thanks to Denise and for everybody for participating. And just a reminder, we actually do have a webinar that might be relevant to some of your questions on today's call, using your education awards, coming up December 3rd at 2 o'clock Eastern Time. So join us for that. And again, you can always look for the listings on the Vista campus for a complete schedule of our web shops. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Denise. And we hope that you go forth and help us in poverty in this country. So we really appreciate everything that you all are doing every day. So thank you.
Thanks.
This concludes today's conference call. You may now disconnect.